I call this meeting of the Land Use Committee Tuesday, September 18th to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved, Erickson.
Second.
Okay. Thank you very much. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion carries. Our first report this afternoon is the 2018 Citizens Planning Academy, and Mr. Jeff Schmidt, our Chief Planning and Zoning Official, will be presenting. Welcome, Jeff.
Welcome. Thank you for having us. Mike Cooper's here this afternoon also, as well as Jason Bieber. Russ Sorensen and Sam Trebilcock stayed back at the office to run the show while we're here. This is the second annual Citizens Planning Academy. We did it last year in October. It was a great success. This year it's also being a great success. We kind of kicked it off in September with a press release asking people to contact us and start to apply to the Citizens Planning Academy. Really, the whole intent, as I've continued to talk about it, is that what it stated. It's a citizen-based, talks about planning, and it's an academy. We do it October 1st and October 29th. In the evening, we ask citizens to give us an application so we know how many people are going to be there. And then at that point, they give us the agenda. They tell us what their interests are in the Planning Academy. And this is what we try to do. We just try to give them an opportunity to look at what Planning and Development Services is. We do participation with them. We talk to them. We really try to do this educational bonding aspect, as well as October is a good time to do it because it's National Planning Month. The whole goal is to empower the citizens to work with us, to have them be able to approach us. The government of Sioux Falls is a really large entity, and by having a planning academy, we pass out business cards. They can talk to us, they can touch us, they can see us, and at that point, like last year, they really found that we were approachable, and they contacted us even today. They continue to call us and email us, and that's what it's all about. When we announced this back in September to apply for this, we've already filled up. This event's completely full. Yes, we could go to a larger facility, but it doesn't work as well. You need to keep it small. We have 45 people already signed up. We're going to try to keep it at that 35 people level. If anybody's still interested in doing this Citizens Planning Academy, we'd still always request that people contact us, communicate with us, talk to us, so that we'll have another one. Whether it'll be next October at a second date somewhere throughout the year, we'd like people just to see if there's an interest so that we can always be doing this. But the whole intent of this is just letting citizens know what the departments do, who the department staffs are, and then at that point, the citizens know city government more, as well as they have that opportunity on a yearly basis, a weekly, a daily basis to contact us and to work with us. So with that, we use Russ Sorensen as the main contact, and they can reach out to us and find out more information about the Planning Academy. And most of you understand how it worked last year, and it worked really well. So if there's any questions, we'd be glad to answer those.
I could hardly turn the pages fast enough to keep up with you. That was quick. Good job, Jeff. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. So did you have, that was the same size as the class last year, like 40?
Yes, we did. We did 32 last year, I think, and again, we try to keep it about 32 to 35 this year. We did it at the library last year, downtown, and this year we're going to do it in City Center.
Okay. And then you fit it all into 2 sessions, huh? I would think with this, knowing this subject a little bit even, I would think it'd take a lot longer, but yeah.
Good point. Can we keep it all in 1 session or not? The easiest way to explain it is we kind of talk about like a college course. This is the 101 course. Okay, we do Planning 101, and the people from last year are really chomping at the bit. When do we get to 201? When do we get to? They want more, but at this point, all the people that signed up, we don't recognize a lot of the names on this list. These 45 people, they're new people, and they're citizens that are just really interested in finding out that first level. So it's the beginning. This is what planning is. This is what a public hearing's like. So we don't get into the next level, but hopefully if we can get through a couple of these early sessions, we'd like to go to the more depth levels. At the same time, as council, you really understand this stuff. Once they start getting into the planning a little bit, then they're like, now we want to understand public work. We want to understand, we're like, that's for another department in another class. We're just giving you the basic level of planning and that the city grows and we have public hearings and so that when they show up here, they go, I have some premise to understand how to go through a process.
That makes sense.
So, yeah.
There isn't a cost to it, is there? Or is
No, there is no cost. We do cookies and coffee.
Okay.
So everything works better with food. So
And
we do cookies and coffee, and they don't have to come to both sessions. We really like them to come to both, but if they can only make one, they can come to one.
Last question, is it on CityLink? I would think this would be something people would even watch out there.
We try to tape it, but we don't do it. Yeah, we don't do it live or anything, but we try to tape it so that we have it available.
Right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Councilor Erickson, anything? Okay, very good. Well, great job. And I agree with you. 30 to 40 people, that's, when I was in education, I really wanted to see my class size go above 30. It's a big challenge.
You're right. I mean, you start getting those larger sizes and people start getting intimidated and, it's hard to get, we break them down into smaller work sessions and groups and you go, okay, can we get 5 groups going? And so you start getting too many people in the room and they don't like it too. It's too many people in a room.
Well, good job. I love the program. I mean, providing that information for our citizens is valuable to them as well as to us too. Makes your job easier when you're working with an informed public.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our second item and last item this afternoon, street and right-of-way vacations. And Erica Beck, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, and representatives from the Planning and Development Services and Public Works Department will be presenting. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you. I get the opportunity to introduce this item. There are experts in the crowd, though, that will provide the details, thankfully. I know that you all know, as well as the rest of the counselors, that every decision that you make has an impact on the community. And given the number of street vacations and right-of-way vacations that you've seen in the recent couple of months, along with those that we anticipate coming forward, we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the policy that internally has been used by Public Works and the Planning Office with respect to street vacations and right-of-way vacations. I know that I've received a number of communications from the private sector wondering if that policy has changed because of projects that they want to move forward with. And so we thought that no different than what we're going to be doing with bringing the annexation policy forward and talking about that, we also wanted to do this with respect to street vacations and right-of-way vacations. In my most recent former life, I had the opportunity to work with Mr. Peppel on an alley vacation, and it is not an easy process. He is very strict with respect to his regulations that he does put one through, although they're very fair as well. So I think it's an opportunity for his team, along with the planning office, to talk more about what those different aspects are that they look at when these types of requests are made, and to share with you also that not every single request that comes forward is even brought forward to the council because of the different situations and variables that are at play. So with that, Chad Heavey, Mike Cooper, Jeff Schmidt, Jason Bieber, Kurt Peppel, they are all here today to provide some additional information on the policy that we currently have in place, along with the process and a few examples as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chad Heavey.
Welcome, Chad.
I will try to, it won't be as brief as what Jeff did, but I'll try. In addition to the presentation, you should have a couple other documents. One is our policy on right-of-way vacations, and then the other one is a complete I'm going to say, vacation packet that includes the petition and all the associated documents that we require. And we'll reference those here shortly, but you have both of those? All right, wonderful. Okay, the majority of the right-of-way vacations that'll come in front of the city council are in fact right-of-way vacations that are in the city of Sioux Falls. And once in a while you're going to see vacations that are not in the city limits, but they are in our extraterritorial jurisdiction, that boundary around Sioux Falls. And so most of our stuff is based on codified law 9-45. But then there's also a state law 31-3 that talks about what happens in a township and what happens in a county. And I just want to talk about those two real briefly, but we're going to focus on what happens in town here. So in Sioux Falls, when we vacate right-of-way, 100% of the adjoining property owners have to consent in writing to the vacation. Now, and I'm going to have to read this because this is a mouthful. In the extraterritorial jurisdiction, a petition can be submitted by 2 or more voters of an organized civil township or a number of voters equal to or greater than 1% of the ballots cast for the last gubernatorial election in the affected county. So, in the county, in the township, you just need some people to petition to vacate a street. In Sioux Falls, you need 100% of the adjoining property owners to sign that petition. And so most of them are going to see 100%, but you will be exposed to a few in that extraterritorial jurisdiction. And when that happens, it more than likely will be at a joint meeting. The county will vote first. If the county approves it, then you will vote. If the county does not approve it, city council, the municipality does not even vote on it. So you're going to see them once in a while, but we're going to focus today on what we do in Sioux Falls. So everything we do is based on state law. Like I said, it requires 100% of the adjoining property owners to sign the petition. There is some time frames on when you can notice the vacation, the public hearing, and then have the hearing. You all know that it takes 2/3 of the vote to approve a vacation. And state law presumes that when right-of-way is vacated, that the adjoining properties owners own to the center. So we've talked before about half goes here and half goes here, and that's a presumption made by state law. So if that's not the case and the petitioner feels that that's now how it should be assigned, they can do the legal work and work with the county on how that vacated right-of-way gets assigned. Now, we have the policy that kind of goes one step further, or maybe several steps further than state law. Again, we have the 100% ownership. We also require that the petitioner contacts all private and public utility owners. So whether it's, and of course most of the public ones are us, private ones would be Mid-Continent, Excel, and they have to provide us in writing that they've made the communication with them and they've gotten a response on, yes, they have utilities, no, they don't, how we're going to handle them. If the proposed vacation is typically a street that's in use, we will require a neighborhood meeting. That's above and beyond what state law requires. They also have to submit a site plan so we can see how they propose to use the vacated right-of-way. And there is a $250 application fee for us to process and bring out the petition. So once the petition is submitted, and you again have the copy of everything there, it's reviewed by Public Works, Planning and Development Services, and Fire Rescue. The first thing we do is we make sure that it is a valid petition and it includes all of the signatures of the property owners abutting the property or the right-of-way. We make sure that no property is deprived of required or reasonable access. We're also looking at the creation of dead-end streets that are not consistent with our engineering design standards. Again, we're looking at protection and access to all of the utilities. Fire rescue is looking for access to emergency vehicles. And then we're also looking at the present and future transportation needs in that area. Since 2010, we have brought, or the city council has vacated 56 different petitions. You can see on the map all over the city. You know, we went from 2 in 2011 to 12 in 2015 and 5 so far this year. Next, I'm going to have Mike Cooper come up, and there are certain areas of town where there's been a concentration of right-of-way vacations, and these have happened, you know, most of those have been in the core of the neighborhood, the different hospitals, the different universities, but Mike will come up and just take you through how some of those have happened over the years.
Very quickly, Chad, you stated 56 vacations since 2010?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Director Cooper.
Thank you. Mike Cooper, Planning and Development Services. I'm going to go back one slide. As Chad talked about this, and I think he'll repeat this, but I'm just going to tell you that in the case of vacation of right-of-way, it could be an unimproved right-of-way or it could be an actual constructed street. And we have seen both versions of that going back through the years historically. The other thing that I'll mention, again, I hope Chad is going to repeat this when he gets back up here, but you know, the discussion about when a right-of-way is vacated, it goes to the adjoining property owners, and the assumption is that you own to the center line of the street. So historically, when most streets get built, the adjoining landowner or landowners dedicated the land and constructed the street. So when it gets vacated or no longer used as a public right-of-way, that's why the land goes back to the two sides, or if it's the same property owner of both sides, that's how the land gets reverted. So we do have a long history of some of the major institutional uses in the city that historically they've expanded their campus. They've come in over the years and petitioned for either existing streets or unimproved right-of-way to be vacated to allow them to expand their campus. And of course, the main two that we're pretty familiar with would be Sanford Health and Avera McKinnon. And I can tell you that we've also worked with these campuses, these institutions, on their long-range planning, their land use planning, so that we kind of know where those boundaries are going to be long-term. So in the case of Sanford, you know, you have West Avenue on the west side. That's been kind of their boundary historically. With McKinnon, we've said that we're not going to go south of 26th Street. So those are some of the things that we've done with these larger institutions over the years as we've looked at how they grow and expand. But without the opportunity to vacate these roads or these right-of-ways, it would really tie their hands and limit their ability to grow. This is the VA hospital, and interestingly enough, what's now on the south side of 26th Street, the Lifescape campus, historically there was a right-of-way that was vacated through there. And so again, when you have these institutional uses, those are the most common ones that we've seen over the years. And we could put up maps of a lot of schools, other institutions that have gone through this process of expanding by way of vacating right-of-way and vacating streets. So the main message today is that we have a good long history of reviewing these, assessing whether they're allowed or not allowed through our process of working through the different city departments. And then there's one other scenario that I thought I would remind the public and the council that we went through fairly recently, which was in terms of economic development. So when Billion Automotive wanted to expand in that northwest corner of 41st and Minnesota. There was a request to vacate a portion of Duluth Avenue, which did go through approval. And one of the interesting parts of this scenario is that part of the impact here would be not only allowing additional economic development, but in this case, when you have a major intersection like 41st and Minnesota, where historically those intersections were a block apart, this would allow us to move those intersections farther back off 41st and Minnesota so that we have more capacity for the major turning lanes that we would see. And this exhibit doesn't show us very well, but on the east side of Minnesota Avenue, where Ace Hardware is, that also, over the years, the streets were moved out farther to the east. So we're getting those major intersections farther away from the center of 41st and Minnesota. So that's another aspect of vacations that we would typically see. But the most common one, obviously, are the institutional uses over the years that have wanted to expand their campuses. Back to Chad.
So here is an example of something that's, we're just beginning in the early stage of discussing with the property owner. And this is what you see on the left of the picture is I-29, and on the bottom is 60th Street North. So this is just north of the Flying J. And circled there in blue is a part of Granite Lane that we are having discussions with the landowner now on vacating that 1,000 feet of roadway. So in 2004, when they wanted to start developing up here, they by ordinance were required to dedicate this collector street. So it's 1,000 feet long, 80 feet wide. And they then dedicated the right-of-way, and then we're estimating they spent about $400,000 to put the infrastructure in. Water, sewer, storm drainage, and the road. So today, that's 80,000 square feet of land that's valued at $960,000 that they are requesting that we vacate. We also next to that, or parallel to the east, is Granite Court. And so Granite Court's also a dedicated right-of-way, and they want to use that portion of the existing today's right-of-way in their redevelopment. And so as you come off that roundabout, that'll just be a driveway into whatever they develop there. So, in the 18 years, the 14 years since it's been there, they dedicated the land and they made the initial improvements. They've paid a street maintenance fee for those 14 years. And we've probably plowed the snow and probably nothing else. Maybe we've done a surface treatment, but we've spent very little money up here. And so when we get to the point we're going to bring this forward, we're not going to oppose this. We don't see any issues with the transportation system. We'll account for all the utilities, and if the utilities are going to remain public, we will maintain an easement. If they're not and they're going to turn private and they'll be all of theirs, then we won't keep an easement, and we'll bring it forward. And this is just more of the things we're working on with them as this parcel redevelops. Now, there has been times when we have had discussions about vacating right-of-way, and we have either not supported it or we've said we have to wait. This is out on Arrowhead Parkway between Veterans Parkway and Sycamore Avenue. This is under construction today. On the north side, a developer wanted to vacate some right-of-way. We were in the midst of determining how much right-of-way we needed out here. We knew we had excess. We didn't know how much and how much we actually needed. But once we got to that point, we vacated some right-of-way on the north side of Arrowhead. We were asked a year or two ago about this Linden Lane. It's more of a frontage road, and we said at that point, we're not ready because we don't know exactly what we need. Well, we know what we need today, and we're actually building it. So, so when, you know, we said we will not support it, we would still, if they said take it to council, we would still bring it to council. They just wouldn't have our support. And so in this case, when they didn't have our support, they decided to wait. Another example is when the Badlands Pond was constructed, there was a lot of discussion about doing something with the Russell Street frontage road, and mainly from a transportation standpoint, the traveling public, we could not support the vacation, and so that was our position. Now, if they would have wanted us to bring it forward, we would have. We would not have supported it. And in that instance, we came up with a different, or they came up with a different option of how to get into there. So, like Mike said, we look at these, there's a lot of eyes on these. We look at these very, very closely. In some instances, we've done, very detailed traffic counts and studies and destination studies to determine where our car's going. If people are driving on Lake Avenue, what is their destination, and how will that the vacation impact those cars? And so, with that, unless there's some other comments by anybody else out here, I'd entertain some questions.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I know you hammered it a few times, but the thing that it was mentioned a couple weeks ago as well as today by you, that I think that for me specifically, I needed to hear over and over that the road was dedicated by those adjoining landowners. It was dedicated with the intent of being improved and a street constructed. Sure, we do some maintenance and whatever after that time, but it was, so to speak, gifted to us. And then when the vacation goes, it's gifted back to, and I understand, it's a lot clearer to me now, because I did struggle thinking, why shouldn't we get a little money for that? Why shouldn't we sell it to them? Well, they didn't sell it to us when they made the street. We didn't buy it. It was dedicated at that time. And so it's a lot clearer for me, I would say. And the importance of this, we've got to be flexible in the city. We've got to be able to be flexible with, the large impact that some of these institutions have, whether it's a hospital or an educational institution or a nonprofit. The impact that they have and their needs are real as well. And so taking a mindful approach with that is very important, because I know that I know I've received a handful of phone calls going, oh my gosh, there's some nerves going on. And so having this information in front of us, obviously not taking it for granted that it's just going to sail through, but having this information so I can make a better informed decision is important. So I thank you for being here. I don't really have any questions at this time. I think that the information that you provided is wonderful, and I think that we all should review it.
If I could just add that during the development process, I mentioned Granite Lane as a collector street. They have to dedicate 80 feet. Now, at that point, they happen to be the only owner out there, so they had to dedicate the entire 80. Now, like Mike mentioned earlier, if it's, people, different owners, they each have to dedicate 40. Now, if it's a residential street that you live on, the right-of-way will be 66. Sometimes it'll be 60. Now, on the larger streets, your arterials, it'll be 100. And they're, most of the time, when we're doing expansion, or like Ellis Road this year, we probably can't fit everything in that 100 feet of right-of-way. So there's times we have to buy a little bit of right-of-way, but when we would purchase that on an arterial street project, it's something we would more than likely never vacate. So that's how that works.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilor Silver, got any questions? Okay. I guess I do. I have a few. I know one of the arguments in a recent vacation for not vacating the right-of-way was it's the public's right-of-way and it's the public's property. So again, and I know that you went through the process here, but when you come forward with a recommendation to vacate, obviously you have use that process step by step to ensure that it's not going to damage the general public. And I think in the most recent vacation, or one of the most recent vacations, that was not an arterial street, so actually that would have been constructed by developers beforehand, not the city of Sioux Falls.
Right.
The utilities that would have remained, still there would have been an easement on that property yet, preventing any building over the top of that, so that there was still access to any of the infrastructure or utilities that were there. And I do know that, as Councilor Erickson had stated, that she'd had people contact her, and I'd had people contact me, and still having individuals contact me regarding this topic, because as you've mentioned, University or Augustana University has, and from what I understand, still looking at another potential vacation back in my old neighborhood. And USF, we did one there just in the last year and a half or two at the maximum. With the Billion Motors vacation, there was some heartburn over that as well too. Can you talk about how that has actually acted as kind of a calming effect on traffic flow, and can you comment on how that maybe has been an improvement versus a negative for the immediate community there?
Well, that's one of the instances where we really looked at the traffic. Where are the cars coming? Where are they going? And we will do traffic counts. And I will tell you that sometimes those traffic counting devices are tampered with to overinflate the actual traffic. But I mean, in instances like this, and if you drive at 41st in Minnesota or anywhere on 41st Street, a lot of these access points that are close, there's usually cars, you can't even use them. And so most of the cars out here that were going and using Duluth, even at that point, were going to Billion. And I haven't had, and I drive out here occasionally, but I haven't had any complaints about cars traveling on the road west of there or 2 blocks to the west. I think it's just been a win-win. And when I stand up here and say, or Kurt, when we get up here and say, we support this recommendation or we support this vacation, it is strictly from a traffic and utility standpoint. That's what we're looking at. That's what our job is to do, is to make sure that the public's infrastructure and right of way is, if it's gone, there isn't going to be a negative impact to the traveling public and to the utilities. And so in this case, it took us a while to get there, but we got there, and I think it's worked out well for everybody.
In other words, you have a strict process that you go through each and every time. And it's not a given that you're going to support it, as is the case with Russell and West Avenue.
I think the one you're referring to, near Augustana, has been talked about for probably 15 years. And, we'll just have to see what the future holds. But there's always good discussion around these different
What's there now wasn't even a developed roadway when I was growing up over there, but obviously it is now, so it still needs to go through the process. So unless there's any other questions, just ignore them. Okay, thank you very much,
You're very welcome.
Chad and Mike. I appreciate taking the time out of your day to present on this very important topic. Okay, item number 4 on our agenda is open discussion. Anything that either of you would like to discuss?
I would just maybe suggest, I know we have public comment next, but I know that we have a few counselors here. If any of the counselors want to address any of these items, I think that would be meaningful before Chad or Cooper leave or anybody else. I
take it by the fact that Councilor Neitzer is moving up to the podium that he would like to make a comment. Welcome, Councilor
I
Neitzer.
saw his pen on fire, so I think he has something to say.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Greg Neitzer, I guess I count as a public, so I will make a few comments. I too have had some calls. I just had a call yesterday from a developer who was quite concerned, very concerned about this particular issue because, you know, they're looking at, you know, how do we move the city forward? You know, if the, in their words, if the standard is going to be that, you know, will we not vacate if it's just for quote unquote a private development or developer, and they brought up a lot of history. And so there's some things that I've been thinking about, and I'm hoping that we can all kind of reflect on. The first is let's just think about it in a new development. You know, for example, my neighborhood wasn't built up that long ago. The developer built the street in front of my house, and they built it for one reason, because you have to provide access to those houses. We have to have a way to get out. That's why they built it. And they built it, they paid for it, they put in all of the infrastructure, and then they dedicated it to the city. So let's fast forward maybe 80 years from now. Let's say somebody leveled every house, you know, and there's nothing left, and they want to redevelop it. What would be the compelling argument not to, you know, to vacate? It was dedicated for houses so that they could have access. Those houses are now gone. So now there may be something where if emergency services looks at it and says, you know, that's the only way we can get down to the development to the south, we've got to have it. Okay, there's a compelling public argument. Now, you know, if it's simply, you know, one person has used it for 15 years to drive to work, does that overrule the public good of redevelopment and progress? And so I think that's something that we need to think about. And as Councilor Kiley talked about, the easement issue, utilities should be a complete non-issue. There's easements in place. And I would venture to say the vast majority of properties have easements versus don't. It's not atypical. Basically, every new property you see in town will have easements. My house has, you know, a 5-foot easement in the back, and it has multiple utilities going through it. As long as the easement in place, you can't, you know, put a structure on top of it. So even if we vacate the road, it's not like somebody's going to put a building on top of a natural gas line. They can't do it. The easement's in place. As far as taking an issue like we recently dealt with, my concern about a vacation in that case, or not vacating it more specifically, is that there's a couple of issues. The first is that with a vacation, you get rid of a public right-of-way. Without a vacation, you start running into issues where you have institutions with accessory parking lots. Accessory parking lots are parking lots that are not on the same lot as the actual use. You now have a right-of-way in between. And that creates safety issues for everybody. That creates safety issues for the driving public, for whoever uses that facility, and in a facility like that, you have children. So I don't believe that is in the public good. The other thing is that if you vacate a road, you now have the ability to do things like you may be able to do parking lot over on that road. You can't vacate that road. Now a developer is forced into the position of, now maybe they have to shift that parking lot over because they have less space to use, because they can't use that other space. It's still a dedicated right-of-way. So what would have been maybe 55 or 60 feet of a setback, you know, from the parking lot to the residential that's still there, now maybe they have to push it. Now they're pushing it up as tight as they can, and now you're losing 10 or 15 feet of setback. And so that creates more of an impact on that adjacent residential, because you have now 60 or 80 feet or whatever less of essentially space to use, you know, and maybe you can't use that space also for parking, so then you don't get as many parking spaces, you still have cars on the street. There's all of those things that go on. So that's the big issue. I'm sensitive to affordable housing. I'm also sensitive to not wanting to sprawl any more than we have to. It's incredibly expensive to develop on the fringe, and we want to make sure we have redevelopment in the core. That's really important. I get it. I would love to, and I'll just close with this. I would love to tell people nothing will ever change, but one of those things that you see in life is that zoning and development changes over time. Nothing is forever. I wish I could guarantee you that a particular parcel will be zoned the same way 100 years from now, or that a certain road is going to be there. I can't do it. Things change, and we have to figure out how to progress and do it in a responsible way, but we've just got to reevaluate this, and I think hopefully we can move on and kind of put some concerns at ease. So thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Neitzer. Okay, we'll move, unless anybody else wants to, Councilor Brecky, if you wanted to make a comment, you would be welcome to do so. And then we'll move to public comments after that. Welcome, Councilor Brecky.
Thank you, Councilor Brecky. I would like to make a comment. I wasn't going to, but you pulled me into it, and so I would. I would say very sincerely, to me, this is just another example of a meeting that we should be having with the full council. It's such an important policy that we all understand. Now, who's missing from this meeting? And now when we go in and decide these, it builds conflict into us, because there's going to be people that don't have the knowledge we all just got. And they're going to be thinking differently about this than all of us. And I just throw that out there. I'm planting seeds with you guys about these committee meetings. Every committee meeting I've attended, and I've attended them all, and I will continue to attend them all, because I want the information that's being given there. And the brief summaries that we get, it's just like, I mean, I really want to consider us, just rolling these into our regular meetings, because there's been nothing that hasn't been super valuable to me at all of them. And I truly believe that it's super valuable to everybody. And the public policy one that we just, too, the financial one we just had, both of them, just amazing information coming out. And then you've got two levels of information going on, so that concerns me. And then, just to the topic itself, I would simply say this, I agree. I mean, it's wonderful to know the policy. I understood it. I've kind of always understood it, but to hear it in details, how we accommodate the institutional growth and all that, is a very rational, logical policy, and the full council should know about it. But also, I would just add my perspective. When that right-of-way is dedicated, it's dedicated, by the developers, and then I would add the phrase, for the public's use and enjoyment. It is a gift by the developer for the public's use and enjoyment. As long as they're using it and enjoying it, it belongs to them. And I only add that phrase because, so when we're voting on that, and when I was making my vote the other night and the ones that we've had, it becomes very important to me, as long as it's being used for their enjoyment. So it's a very serious vote for me, and I think everybody took it that way. But I do believe, no matter what policies that we have as a city hall, as, administratively, the council does need to act as that balancing act from time to time. And so, with all due respect, to the administrative staff, sometimes we're going to depart, no matter all the studying they're doing. It's a good, logical policy. At least in my vote on those issues, I still believed that that was necessary for the public use. And that last final piece of the neighborhood convinced me of that. So, with respect to the administration, I'm not always going to just be in lockstep with them, because that final piece of information comes in, sometimes it can be very persuasive. But my final say is, in those votes, I do believe that everybody did take it very seriously. And that's, that was my pitch then, and it is now. When it requires a supermajority, there's a reason for that, because those are very serious decisions. You're taking that right away that was a gift to the public, and you're giving it back to the private sector. So you better not need it anymore. You better never ever need it anymore, because you'll have to buy it back. So it just needs to be a very conscientious decision, and I do believe we all viewed it that way. So that would just be my 2 cents. Thanks for calling me up.
Okay, we'll move into public input now. Are there any members of the public that would like to address this item? Okay.
Councilor Craig.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I would just like to add that this is an open meeting, it is recorded, and so I encourage all those in the public that may be affected by a right-of-way or someone who may want to do a right-of-way to certainly watch this. I see our media is here as well. I'm sure he'll have a riveting story on this particular topic. And so, and the counselors that aren't here, you are always welcome to every single committee meeting and welcome to speak as well. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of dig into some different topics. We can always have another informational and bring additional items forward, but of course everyone is welcome. They're recorded, they're put out there for us to all be reviewing as needed. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who presented this afternoon. I appreciate it. This meeting is adjourned.